What's up everybody, Pete the Hybrid Guy here, and today in this episode we are going to install an Apple or Android CarPlay unit into this 2006 Toyota Prius. But before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button so I can keep bringing you awesome content. If you own a 2004 to 2009 Toyota Prius and you're looking to upgrade your radio, this is the video for you. In this video, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to remove all of this, all the trim panels, the vents, everything, and then properly wire in your new Apple or Android CarPlay unit. So let's jump over to the bench, see what we're working with, and go from there. So what we're working with today is I've got a few tools set out. The basics of what we're going to need are a screwdriver, a razor knife. I'm going to use my 10mm socket on my little 1/4" impact. I've got my new Sony, I think this is an XAV-1000 unit that we're going to put in, the wiring harnesses, butt connectors, and of course the new dash trim pieces. What's really important is this little guy over here. This is a resistor, and these are the directions for where to put that resistor in your wiring harness so that your HVAC system works properly. So first thing that we're going to do is dive in, get the dash all tore out, get that old unit out, and we'll go from there. What my process is going to be with removing this dash is there's a screw right here that we'll need to take out. This lower portion will pop out, the upper portion will pop out, the vents on both sides will also need to come out as well. And once that's out of the way, we'll have access to this. So if you have any issues pulling this dash, stop the video and let me know, and I'm happy to help you along the way. So let's dive in and get this dash all taken out. Okay, the process to get this lower piece out is actually pretty easy. There's just 2 screws here and here that you need to remove. Once you do that, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that will allow this whole unit to come right out. So I'm going to pull those out and we'll take a look and see what we've got. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do now that we have our unit out is get our wires connected. On Prius, it's really critical that you use this resistor, and I'm going to show you exactly where that needs to go. After we get the wires connected and I show you where that resistor goes, then what we're going to focus on is putting the unit into the brackets and then making sure that we have the trim in the right places so this looks like it was professionally done. So let's dive in and get that wiring harness put together. Before we put our wiring harness together, I want to make sure that we have the right tools for the job. I've got my wire strippers and crimpers, I've got my wiring harness, and I have these butt connectors right here. The reason that I have these particular ones is they have heat shrink around them. So when you connect them, grab yourself a heat gun or a good hot hair dryer and shrink these connectors around the wires. It'll ensure a weather-tight seal because the last thing that anybody wants is to have their radio not working while driving down the road. So those are the tools that I'm going to use. Now I'm going to get together and put this wiring harness together. One more thing and then I promise we'll get right to it. I want to do an up close and personal with this wiring harness. Now this one right here is the one that's going to go into our unit, and you may see that there are some of these tags on here that say parking brake, reverse wire, and what are these things? Now, the car that we're working on has a reverse camera. If you were putting a backup camera into this Prius that didn't have one before, you're going to need to use these wires because they're going to need to have signals to tell the head unit to turn, to basically turn the camera on when it goes into reverse. This parking brake one is a feature that you would need to have. So if you were hooking up your phone, it wants to ensure that you're stopped and your phone is connected. So there's ways around these things. I've noticed with Apple Play units, you don't need to hook up the parking brake, but with Android units, you definitely do. Where this is an Apple only unit that we're putting in by Sony, we're not going to worry about this reverse input wire, and we're not going to worry about the parking brake wire. There is a spot for this remote wire that we're going to use. Other than that, it's pretty much go color by color to your harness over here and this harness here. Once you've got all those connected, that's one of the hardest parts. I'll show you what I do to keep my wires nice and cleaned up, and then we can plug this in and we can put our new unit into the brackets and then get this thing back in the car. I haven't heat shrunk any of my wires yet, and I wanted to make something very clear as you put this wiring harness together. There are colored wires, but there are also colored wires that have a positive and a negative. It's tough to see on the camera, but you can see it with your eyes when you're holding the harness. There are solid colored wires and then wires that have a black stripe on them. Those are the negative side. So you need to make sure that when you're hooking your wires together that they go black stripe to black stripe and solid to solid. Now, some of these other wires, I will tell you what they are. Typically on most, and especially on Toyota vehicles, the green, the purple, the white, and the gray, those are all your speaker wires front and back, side to side. So those wires are very important to get hooked up correctly, especially with the striping. Okay? If you don't do it that way, you'll end up with sound that doesn't sound very right. Now these wires over here are also very important. The black is your ground. The yellow wire is your power constant. And the red wire is your power when the vehicle turns on. This orange wire is important because it's your illumination wire. So that means if you wanted to dim everything when you have the car on at night, this would be your dim wire. This one right here is for a remote. Typically this can do several things like run a remote antenna, or if you're running a subwoofer or amp, you use this remote wire to power that amplifier on. I've got it connected and just set out of the way, so we don't necessarily need it because we're not hooking an amp up, but that's what all those wires do. Again, we're not using the reverse wire or the parking brake because this vehicle already has a backup camera. If you were going to do a backup camera, you would want to connect this into the reverse input wire on your vehicle, and this one you could connect to the parking brake wire, or you could loop it onto the new unit itself and just ground it out. All it's looking for is a signal input to tell the vehicle, hey, I want to connect my phone, I'm in a safe place, I'm in park, I've got the parking brake on, I'm not going anywhere. So that's all these wires are for. Now what we're going to do is get the heat gun out, and we're going to not solder, but seal all these up so they're nice and weather tight, and then I'll show you how to wrap the harness to make it look super professional. Now that we've got the harness all put together, you can see I took the time to heat all of these together. And be careful, they will stick together sometimes, and this is very hot, so be careful where you're touching right after. I let this harness cool down before I do any sort of, see what I mean by they will stick together. You got to let them kind of cool. But I'm going to let this harness cool down a bit, and then I'm going to wrap it in a way that tucks everything together like so. So I've got it in a nice tight bundle. Now I know, because I've done a ton of these installs, that this harness is more than likely going to be fine. You may want to test fit everything, plug everything in, and make sure it comes on. I'm pretty confident in my wiring that it's going to be just right. So from here, what I'm going to do is just let this cool down for a few minutes, and then we're going to do a wrap sequence. So get out your electrical tape, and I'll show you how to do a nice tight wrap to make this look nice and professional. Cool, so I let my harness cool off a little bit, and now I can touch them without burning my hands. What I want to do to make this harness look professional is bind it together. So what I'm going to do is use some small zip ties, and I'm going to put them in several different areas. Then I'm going to use some tape and tightly wrap around that harness to make it look amazing. It's really easy. All you need is some small zip ties, and find the areas where you want to put them, giving yourself a little bit of flexibility for your ends to be able to connect. Zip them on, and I like to hold it nice and tight in that area. Then I'll just take my snips, snip it off just like that. So what I'm going to do from here is finish putting zip ties on the rest of this harness, and then I'm going to wrap it, and we'll look at the finished product in just a minute. Okay, so let's take a look. Oops, I missed a spot there, so I'll have to wrap it in just a second. But overall, I put an end where I ended my tape wrapping job. I put another zip tie there so it won't just unravel. But overall, this looks like a pretty solid, professionally wrapped harness. Other than this, I'm going to fix that though, so don't judge me too much. But this thing's ready to go in the car. So what our next step is going to be here is to actually take this and pull all the screws out on both sides, get it separated, and then let's fit our new unit in there, and then we can head over to the car and test fit this thing. There's another really important thing that we've got to do in the car, which I'll show you when we get there, and that's installing that little resistor wire so our HVAC will work. It doesn't go on this harness, but it does go in the car, and we have to know how to work with it so we can have air conditioning and heating when we're driving down the road. Okay, now that I have my stereo out of the way, I like to try to use these factory brackets where I can. So I'm going to try to use them, and if I have to, I'll use these aftermarket ones, but they're flimsy and they don't always give the best fit and finish. So I'm going to try to use these factory brackets first. Now, our new unit is going to need some help filling in the gaps, so that's why we have this piece here. So let's first see if we can get our new unit to fit in to our existing brackets and see if we can get our gap filler to work. If not, then we'll try a different approach. Okay, so I've got these factory brackets on here, and one thing I didn't mention is that in your new stereo box there will probably be some special screws that you will need to put your brackets on. Now, I don't know if this works yet. I just know that I have an install kit over here in case this does not. So I'm going to test fit this in the car real quick and tell you if it does. If it does, we're going to use it and we'll be able to install our trim piece and make it look nice and factory. If not, I'm going to come back and we'll swap out these brackets. So let's go test fit it at the car. Okay, so these metal brackets are going to work for us, which is great because I'd prefer a nice solid metal bracket over these flimsy plastic ones. Now, I did have to do a couple things which I will tell you that you're probably going to have to do as well. If you notice where this bottom tray is, and you notice that in conjunction with the face of the unit, they are not lined up, which you have to test fit whatever unit you're going to put in your vehicle to the bracket. Otherwise, you'll just secure it on there and then you won't know if the depth is proper. So when I set it in the car, this unit with the trim ring that goes around it was too far back. So I moved it forward and found the correct holes that I needed to make sure that the depth was right. Now what I can do from here is head over to the car and I can show you where to put that resistor and how to put the trim ring on with the provided, I had a little bag of little provided white clips, and we'll set this in and take a look at it. Before I can show you how to do the resistor part, I want to make sure that you're doing this procedure, which is test fitting the unit in there. You can see that everything is up top and connected down below, and it looks like it's sticking way far out. But the thing is, with this trim ring, when you put the trim ring on, it's going to fill in the gaps on each side, right? And then with your base piece, which is this here, it's going to need to go up like that. And you can see that that's going to make it look nice and like a nice factory finish right there, okay? So what I'm going to do from here is, because I know that the depth is correct, I can pull my trim ring out, and then right here on this trim ring, in that little bag with the resistor, there's 4 clips that are going to go on here. Now those are going to help so they go into here and keep this in nice and tight. So I'll put those in, but more importantly, what we need to do now is remove this out of the way and look at where that resistor goes. According to our instructions, we're looking for a 20-pin connector, which is this one, and we can tell that because we're looking for these outer white and pink wires right here. And next to those wires, if you flip this around, there's your white, your pink, and then it says there will be a white, a black, and a red. So those right there are the wires that we're looking for, but we're only going to use this white wire and this pink wire. Now, what you need to do is take that little resistor and put it in between these 2 wires. So there's a couple ways that you can do it. What I'm going to do is actually nip these wires here and then reconnect them, and I'm going to reconnect them with my butt connectors and then heat shrink them down so I have a nice solid connection. We want to make sure that this resistor doesn't touch anything. If you have a better way of connecting that resistor between those 2 wires, go for it. But that's all we really need to do, and that's going to help send the proper signal to our HVAC system controls so we can have proper heating, air conditioning, proper mode setting, and all of that. And that is outlined right here in these instructions. So let's go ahead and get that done, and then we can start installing our new stereo. So what I did here is I just stripped the wire back a little bit, and I got thinking about it. I'm like, I should probably flow some solder here and here. Now, at this point, if you didn't want to, you wouldn't have to. I'm going to, because I want a good secure connection between here and here, but you could just wrap this up with some electrical tape like we used earlier and tuck it away, and you should be just fine. As long as this resistor is touching bare wire on each side, that's really what matters. So I'm going to flow a little bit of solder, get this thing wrapped up, and then we can start installing the rest of our stereo. Pretty excited for it. So all I did right here was just take a little bit of solder and secure it in on each side. Again, I want this thing to be nice and functional, very functional, so I soldered it in. You wouldn't have to if you did a different method of crimping. I have access to these tools, and it's definitely something. Soldering is definitely a skill that is fun, and it has tons of uses. So by all means, if you want to, solder that in. But this is where that resistor goes. Now what we're going to do is take these clips, and we'll get them on our trim ring, and we're just going to put all of this stereo back together. One more thing to note though. Now this car does not have Bluetooth, but our stereo unit does. So that means we're going to route a tiny microphone through our dash as we put this back together. Probably come up this pillar here, and I like to put mine usually right in this area here, somewhere in here where it's accessible and out of the way. Or over here is a good spot too. So I'm going to, as I put the stereo in, route that microphone up through my dash, up this way, and then I'll just determine afterwards where I want to have that position. But no, that's another thing that's going on here. Now, if this car did have Bluetooth, I personally probably wouldn't worry about it unless I wanted that option through my new stereo unit and not the factory unit. Sometimes you can run into problems where if you're crossing the different Bluetooths, they can interfere with each other and cause all sorts of different issues. So just be careful when you do that. Otherwise, you may end up with some Bluetooth issues. So what I'm going to do now, again, is wrap this up. I'm going to set the camera up and start putting all of this back together. And then we'll fire this thing up, see how it looks. So here we go, moment of truth. Wow, so far so good. Boots up. All right, looking good. Let's go home, check out a couple other things. Now remember, we can't use our camera with this, but we do have an auxiliary port that we can use. But our rear camera is, this rear camera is not the same as that rear camera. Like when I go into reverse here, see, different camera. So I'm gonna go ahead and call this one complete. So let's step out of the car, get everything wrapped up, and get this car back out on the road. So that wraps it up for this radio install for our 2006 Toyota Prius. We now have a nice Bluetooth system in there that gives us full control over our phone. We get updated navigation, which is really critical, and we have a lot more features that we didn't have before. Thank you for watching, and please sure to let me know if you have any comments. I'm happy to help out where I can, and I'll see you in the next episode.